The sun rises slowly over the hills. Everywhere is golden sunlight, but still, most nights with hotels are crowded. There are days with dark clouds are shrouded. They don't smile and they never will. Only volunteers get the fill. Empty promises is what they hear. No running water from year to year. Hearts that no one desire. That if there is a Messiah, someday he hear their whispered prayer. Covered always bare and scanty. 10 people in a one-bedroom shanty. Forced to sell on the pavement. No vacancy, no employment. Cattle fire cracker from gunshot. Blood just flow when things get hot. Afraid to look out the window. To hear voices from the ghetto. Crying, crying, crying. Lord, Lord. Crying, crying. Voices from the ghetto. Crying, crying, crying. Lord, Lord. Crying. Voices from the ghetto. Help us, Father. Lord. Mothers just hold their head on ball. And them woman stronger than a wall. A big pusher eyeing she daughter. Son in jail for manslaughter. Too bad for him, he a name bad boys. No bail, that's the black man's choice. Like Shadow say, poverty is hell. She little girl child belly start to swell. Some say life is a cycle, but don't draw she no circle. Where will it all end? Only time to tell. Outside the siren keep howling, inside your belly will growling. Police raid very often. Simpson measuring a coffin. One night in bed you're sleeping. Next night is a wave that you're keeping. So you're praying to win the lotto, not to hear voices from the ghetto. Crying, 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 crying. Voices from the ghetto. Crying, Lord, crying, voices from the ghetto. We are not a forgotten people. Yo.
Good evening, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. My name is Jomo Thomas. The program you're about to listen to is called Voices. This is the Voices program for November 25th, 2024. As I promised last week at the end of the program, we are going to have Stephen Joachim. I call him a maverick. I call him a contrarian. Other people may have some other nice choice names for him. But we will see when we get there. In a few minutes, as is normal, what I do, I read my column from last week, and then Stephen may want to pick up on anything there, or we can go right into whatever we are going to talk about. So here goes. I think I lost the thing now. All right, here it is. I had my stuff lined up and then I did not do what I'm supposed to. The piece is called November to Remember. And it goes like this. As children, we were reminded that the rainy season began in June, but by November, it was all over. Not so this year. Those whose jobs it is to pay attention to the weather may know more But from all appearances, this November will be one of the wettest we have experienced in a long time. Fortunately, no lives have been lost, but heavy rains have resulted in floods and landslides across the country. These events continue to place a heavy strain on the nation's slender resources as well as the nerves of citizens. Grenada, Trinidad, Martinique, Guadeloupe, our neighbors, have also experienced heavy rains and flooding. The weather systems we are experiencing these days have an out-of-worldly appearance. It seems to us to forget this. I read it again. It's too often for us to forget the swiftness with which Hurricane Beryl developed and the devastating rat with which she targeted Grenada, Jamaica, Mexico, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Coming as it did on July 1st, 2024, climate scientists really expect to see a hurricane develop from a tropical storm to a Category 4 in less than 48 hours, but Beryl did. If we are paying attention to what's occurring across the region, we may know that the sister isle of Cuba, strained as it is already by the crushing illegal economic blockade imposed by the United States government for the past 6 decades, has been walloped by 2 hurricanes, Oscar and Raphael, and an earthquake that measured 6.8 on the Richter scale. Many deniers claim that climate change is a hoax. However, we come down on this issue. One thing is certain: days and nights are hotter than ever. Rainfall is swift. Rain falls in swift, short bursts. Combined, the rain and the sun result in a double warming for farmers whose produce is scorched or washed away. If things continue on this path, the right to cool air will assume greater urgency, and more of our people will need assistance as their homes become compromised if they are not destroyed. The sad reality is that small island states, least able to cope with the destruction caused by these weather patterns, are often made to carry the resulting burden alone. Bigger, richer countries whose reckless policies create the conditions that allow for drastic changes in our weather routinely refuse to help. Our countries are compelled to borrow more, thus sinking deeper and deeper into debt. These challenges present a real problem for developing countries. We may be akin to sitting ducks anticipating the next weather event. There's nothing we can do to significantly impact the weather. Each year, those who can jet set across the globe, to climate conferences do so. They make pious announcements about the Earth's dangers and then commit to remedial action, which turns out to be empty promises. However dire the situation becomes, we have a responsibility to ourselves. Our government must do more than sit back, wait for disaster, and then run around the world hoping that international institutions or government will lend a helping hand. All communities have to be mobilized to ensure that whatever little we can do is done. Cuba has an excellent civil defense system. We can learn from it. To protect against loss of life, they move their people out of harm's way. Since 2013, we have not lost lives on the scale to a single weather event, but property damage runs into the millions of dollars. We have to find ways to build better. In the Northern Caribbean, building codes demand concrete roof. Residents are encouraged to build solid foundations that may withstand the effects of prolonged heavy rain and earth movement. Rivers, drains, gutters must be regularly cleaned. Such proactive activities help us avoid flooding. After the recent rain and extensive flooding in Caliacua, Camilo Gonzalez, the parliamentary representative, promptly pointed an accusatory finger at climate change. But was it change in the weather and the heavy rain that caused the flooding? The streets in Caliacua are in disrepair. The government has contracted to fix the roads. Unfortunately, all of them were dug up at once, creating unevenness, blockage from debris, and construction barriers. Anyone with community knowledge of Caliacua knows that only the area near the Panyard experiences flooding. Why was a large section of Caliacua, including the area surrounding the police station, overrun by flood waters? The simple truth is that the river was blocked at the bridge next to rainforests. Massive logs, thousands of plastic bottles, and other garbage accumulated over time blocked the water's path. If the responsible parties had paid attention to regular river cleaning, especially at the choke hole at the bridge, the chance of such extensive flooding would be non-existent. Two other points need to be made. In this age of scientific and technological advancement, it is depressingly shocking and disappointing to hear people who ought to know better blaming God's wrath for national occurrences and humanity's failures. Do we still believe God speaks when the thunder rolls and lightning flashes? The other vexing question concerns our climate problem, which I explained as Gonzalez blight. For one thing, the frequent weather events are not only events in reality. They occur across the region with devastating impact. PM Mitchell, Pierre, Motley, Skerritt, and Rowley also blights on their nations. The other point about these silly responses is that the damage caused by lousy weather distracts from the other pressing problems, many of which can probably be blamed on Gonzalez and his clansmen. Official corruption, bad roads, unemployment, poverty, crime, increasing hopelessness among the youth. In these serious times, we need a clear mind and a strong will. Any discussion about the way forward must be grounded in scientific understanding of our reality and devoid of nonsensical political rhetoric. Stephen, that was my take last week. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. I don't know if anything jumps out of you.
I did, but before I get to that, Jomo, I'd like to say good night to my friend Kaba. And I thought of him when you started the show with one of my favorite songs there. Singing Santra. I'm a calypso man. I love my
Yes,
calypso.
I know you're a calypso man.
I like
Yes.
my calypso. So, but Kaba tells me he's better now. He had a problem with his leg, and he can now walk around. He's much better. So good.
Oh, great, wonderful. And we're talking about Kaba, the president of the Calypso Association.
Yeah. Old Kaba Bennett. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I'm speaking to Chanel earlier today too. Anyway, that I was also reading your column. I guess it was last week's column then, I guess, Joel. The one
Last week's was
the giant electoral asteroid that strikes America's intellectual class.
No, that was 3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. I like that. I like that one. But let's talk about the November.
But incidentally, I must say that column was not mine. That was a guest column by the brilliant independent journalist Matt Taibbi. I don't know if you have a chance to read him, but I actually subscribe to his writing.
No, I don't know him, but I really enjoyed that column.
You should go and look for him.
There's one of the things I really enjoy reading is, to be honest with you, I like reading English people in particular. They seem to have an interesting way of writing, particularly their political class, and they have a way of writing that really it puts a smile on your face at the same time while they're addressing very serious matters. Yes. And speaking of serious matters, Jomo, Calico. There's a road that goes up behind Calico that is being rebuilt now.
Yes, since 2019.
Yeah, what do you call that road? Up into Ribishi and so on back then.
That's the Fair Hall Road.
The Fair Hall Road, yeah. Well, I like to walk since I can't run like you.
I've seen you walking.
I don't have knees now. So clearly, this is because you're closer to your African roots than I am to my African roots. And therefore, you have much better and stronger knees than I am to run longer distances than I can. So that's a good thing. So anyway, so I'm walking a couple of days ago up the same Fair Hall Road that I can't imagine how much money we're spending rebuilding that. And a piece that they have finished, one of the pieces that they have finished, probably less than a month ago now, because it's taken forever to build the road, as you know, right?
Yes.
Jomo, one of the pieces is already caving in.
Not
it's
surprised.
Already caving in with big holes in it. Not surprising. Many years ago, I said, our government seems to like giving away a lot of scholarships to people. One of these days, I'm hoping they'll send somebody away to learn how to build a proper road. Because it's either that we are incompetent or somebody stopping our engineers from building proper roads, because I don't get it.
I don't think it's incompetence, Stephen. I think it's a game. I think it's a game. Look, it's the same way in which they patch the roads. So there's a
Yeah.
little hole here. They don't patch that little hole. They dig out 10
big
feet,
space.
15 feet. They fix that, leave the little hole because they're expecting to come back in 6 months when that little hole becomes a crater. If you remember, when they were rebuilding the Leeward Highway, before it was finished, it started collapsing. Roads are not built as they used to be built.
Well, the same thing is now happening. I lived in Dominica once about, almost 30 years ago now, for a couple of years. And at that time, the Canadians had spent a ton load of money helping to rebuild Dominica's roads. And those roads at that time were properly built. You know, they have proper drainage, they had a proper base, and they stood up for an awful lot of years. Yeah. Our roads, no matter where we go, seem to be pretty atrocious. The only one I can think of that is slightly different or any different is the road from Sion Hill down into Kingstown, Murray's Road.
No, but that is not different, Stephen. I have been back here for 20 years now, and that was dug up twice already.
Well, I remember when a section of that was done. They actually did a concrete base first, and then they put some tarmac on top of it. So it hasn't opened up as badly as some of the others have.
No, but remember, it's twice. They have done it twice in 20 years. Well, I think the best piece of road we have is that piece from Rillen Hill down to, where can we say? Down to the road where you can swing to go up to what used to be the casino.
Oh, right. Okay.
That was built like a good 20, 30 years ago. And it's still there.
Long time ago, yeah, when I was a youngster, we used to have car racing down there.
Yeah.
Used to race along that strip there. Anyway.
But Stephen, I have also been one who have advocated for, because of the amount of millions of dollars, in the last 2 years, we are spending close to $200 million in roads. Remember when the Prime Minister came back from Taiwan in May, he announced that he received another $25 million loan from the Taiwanese to build roads. Remember last year in the budget, Minister Daniel said there was $127 million to build roads. And before that, what happens is that they spend a lot of money, but we don't see the progress. We don't see the progress. So
I saw a video yesterday. It's like an hour and a half long. I don't know if you've seen pieces of it or not. It was the president of Guyana, Ephraim Ali, I believe. Is not sure.
Crossing out some engineers?
Yes.
Yes, I saw that.
For being 3 or 4 months late on projects. So I sent it to one of my friends who happens to be a Labour Party supporter. And of course, our Prime Minister does that too. He just doesn't do it in public. And I thought, well, maybe he should do it in public, because maybe people need to be embarrassed and humiliated when they don't do a good job. When you're not doing your job, when you're taking out taxpayers' money and not doing a proper job, what you are, as far as I'm concerned, is a thief, because all you're doing is stealing our money. And I see too much of that. I see what's going on in Calico and up behind Calico, and you just shake your head. Look at the playing field up in Ribishie that they were building, that the wall fell down. And of course, we hear nothing about that again. And it's a little disturbing that we're not willing to call out people when they're wasting our money like this.
But Stephen, I don't think that the government would want to call out anybody. If you check, I mean, my information is that the man who has the contract to rebuild the roads in Calico, he's not an engineer. He's probably just somebody who tendered, and whatever happened, voila, he ends up with the contract to build a road. I found out recently that there's a trained engineer who's a consultant on the road. But my information is that the person who has the contract to build a road has no engineering or road building experience, except for what he was picked up in recent times.
But Joe, shouldn't it be public knowledge?
Well, I think it is public knowledge. I think we can go to the registry and find out who have the contracts.
Oh, I see. It's interesting because in certain places, other countries, and in St. Vincent sometimes, you see the big signs up about this project being done by such and such, and financed by such and such. But I haven't seen anything about the Calico roads. saying who's doing it. And the
Yeah,
person,
there's something there. It's right next to the. I'll look, and I'll probably be able to tell you tomorrow. It's right next to the Anglican Church.
is this the same
There's
person? Is this the same person doing the road? The road up the Fairhall Road?
no.
A different person.
KLT, the QAT Dynamic,
No.
KDL, the Community Dynamic Limited are the ones who are building the road, the Fairhall Road, and they're the same ones who took 5 years as well to build the Otley Hall.
You mean it's their money? You mean it's Q80 money being used? Because it's definitely not Q80 people. These are local Vincentian people I see up there working.
Well,
and the roads are fall, and the first set of rains came down. That road is already buckling very badly.
It's interesting that you say that, Stephen. There's something about that KDL company that I think an investigative reporter may find quite. Try to go on and check I had the contract pulled, and if you read the minutes on who are in there and what they're trying to do, you would get a feel for what's happening there.
I guess you're not prepared to tell us more.
No, well, essentially, what I saw when I pulled up the contract is that there was this meeting between the prime minister. Apparently was trying to get the road to be hustled up. So the Q80 investors, there was this Zoom meeting which the prime minister chaired, and the person from Kuwait was brought on. So you have the minutes from that meeting, and the prime minister literally imploring them to do what they need to do to get the roads done. But part of the problem, they try to blame Braxa. Another part was blamed for the private contractors. My information tells me that part of the reasons why these roads are taking this long is because monies that are earmarked for this or that project is switched here, there, and everywhere. It's the classic example of taking digging a hole to fill a hole.
Yeah, but what I also heard, I don't know how true it is that a contractor gets a job and then he then divides it into 5 or 10
subcontractors.
And then the subcontractors don't seem to get paid. The workmen don't seem to get paid. They stop working. The subcontractors stop working. And then the government comes down and then they hire some more subcontractors. And then, you just wonder about the definition of insanity. And we don't seem to learn. This is what scares me. We're doing the same thing over and over again, and we don't seem to learn in any which way whatsoever.
I don't think there's any intent to learn. I think that is how you spread the largesse around. It is not to learn anything. It's a rotted system that is not intended to be efficient or effective. It is a system that is intended to feed the tentacles, for want of a better word.
So you write this article, and let me ask you something. What are you hoping that to achieve with this article, other than to expose what we really already know, then, Jomo? That nothing changes.
Well, no, Stephen, I don't write because I intend that there would be change. If I write an article and then Saturday or Sunday you call me and say, "Oh, Jomo, I read the article and I think that's good," I say, "All right." I touched at least one person with that one. But I write because I think that there are certain things that need to be said.
Okay.
And I say it.
Yes. So you don't expect anything to change really then?
It's not that I don't expect anything to change. I don't overly credit myself as this big mover who's going to change the world.
But somebody has to start making some small changes along the way. We certainly, who's building the road going up to Fort Charlotte? Has that been finished yet?
No, that's not finished yet. Fort Charlotte is not finished yet either. And years it's going now.
Yes,
so the tourists are closed out for next. Remember the moat that when you come off of the Otley Hall. I think when you get to the top of the hill and you're swinging off to go up to Fort, there's that moat there, that small bridge that must have been there for probably like 100 years.
100 years, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is compromised now. And one would have thought that part of the immediacy of the work would have been to strengthen that.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure how much work. The last I went up there because a colleague of mine came on a tourist ship. We went to Brooklyn Cottage together many decades ago, and he and his wife came. So I drove them up there,
Yep.
and it was still there, the way that was, and that must have been a 5 or 6 months ago. Well, it's the last tourist season that was. It's probably more than 5 or 6 months ago.
For years, right? We've said that tourism is our major driver of our economic development for many, many moons. And for many years, I have been begging and saying, why is it that we don't invest in our tourism infrastructure? St. Vincent and the Grenadines has a spectacularly beautiful country. Unfortunately, for most people, you can't see it. You can't get to the nice tourism sites. You know, you think of, I remember a year or two ago, no, I don't know if Dominica completed this, but they had announced plans to build a cable car from Roseau, their capital, up into the
mountains.
They're beautiful areas, right? As I said, I live in Dominica for a while, so it's also a beautiful country. But it seems to me they're trying to invest in their tourism infrastructure, but we are not. We're not trying to.
Stephen, remember, a few years ago, I think, you know, the Europeans have these round of monies that they give to the region.
Yeah.
And I remember one of them, I can't remember if it was Euro 10 or Euro 11, whatever it's called, because I'm forgetting the name now. But one of those was to help to build tourism sites. So, for example, they contributed to some small hotels. They helped. And in fact, I think that's where the money to redo Fort Charlotte and Warraco and the place up at La Soufrière, you know, to fix the toilets, you know. And the problem is, I don't know how much money they give, but whatever the money was, that money was used to fix it. And in St. Vincent, we don't have any repair plan. So you fix it. But you know, Stephen, if you have a house and you paint it today, and it's weathered over the years, it's going to lose its luster. It's going to look drab. It's going to fall apart. The toilet is going to break. Grass is going to grow. But there's no plan in St. Vincent to correct that. And I think that's one of the big problems we have.
Well, as I said, it's kind of all, you almost give up hope sometimes, because we spend all the money. We're invested in an airport. We've invested in the latest one, the Hotel at Diamond. And I keep wondering, why are tourists coming here for? It's like we never talk about why they should come here. You know, we never talk about what they're going to do when they come here. What are they going to see when they come here? You've heard the taxi drivers complaining, and yet nothing seems to get done about it. So that's why I was very excited when I saw as I said, the president of Guyana actually speaking very harshly to his engineers and his construction companies and so on about, why are you behind schedule? Tell us why. But we don't seem to do that here. Instead, it's our friends. And then, of course, you know, we turn to the role of the planning department and so on too. And you've probably heard me comment about the disaster at Jack's Road, where somebody's allowed to build an ugly warehouse right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So, you know, you talk about in your article there about November and plan, you talk about planning and you know, reins and regulations and all of that. Since when do you mention actually about building codes, for example, right? I mean, when does anything ever get enforced in this country? So how are we going to ever get better?
Things get enforced when the authorities want it enforced. Don't forget
selected people.
Don't forget the environmental issues were invoked to deal with bigger bigs. Or some other people to do this or that. You may have a speedy intervention. But when it comes to real difficulties, real problems, we don't get that. I mentioned, for example, like in Bermuda, in Jamaica, you see them changing the ways in which they're doing the roof on the houses. They're putting the shutters on the windows, which is much like in the old days. When I was a little boy growing up, I remember many houses had shutters to protect against the hurricane. But back in those days too, we didn't have glass windows. We had board. And then you had the shutter outside, which, you know.
Yeah, I remember.
So things are changing, and the building codes are not responding in the ways to the challenges we have. I hear Finance Minister Camilo Gonzalez and PM Gonzalez all the time say, we are building back smart and we are building back better. But I don't see it, or I don't hear that fleshed out, how we are going to build smarter and better.
Yep, agreed 100%. I don't know if it'll ever happen. So anyway, did you agree with your friend who wrote whose opinion you wrote in your article about the giant electoral asteroid striking America's intellectual class? What was your
Without a doubt. Stephen, I expressed certain views before that election.
Yep.
Because you might have heard me say before that I don't look at TV. I haven't turned my TV on for about 8 years because I find CNN and MSNBC and Fox, which I very rarely looked at, BBC and so on, to be pure propaganda.
Yeah.
So I try to go in search of more independent-minded people. So my favorite guys are people like Matt Taibbi, Patrick Lawrence, Caitlin John Stone, Chris Hedges, and many others, because I think that they don't carry the status quo view. They try to give you an opinion that may almost shock you. You know, for example, I was looking at, I don't know if you know the guy, George Galloway, the British politician. And he was on Piers Morgan. And he told Piers Morgan, then when he did the interview, Richard Sunak was the prime minister. And Pierre, they were talking about Ukraine and what was happening. And Galloway said, I trust Putin more than I trust little Richie Sunak. And Pierre Morgan was out of his wits, wanted to understand, well, how could he trust this Russian dictator more than this democratic leader? And Galloway went on to show him why. But so I try to read those kind of guys because I think it gives me a better. So to circle back to that. So when we were talking about the elections, run up to the election, I clearly saw that Kamala Harris had a mountain to climb.
Yeah.
Because she had some baggage, but all the people who supported her wanted you to fall in line and not to mention her baggage.
Absolutely.
And I was told that I secretly wanted Trump to win, simply because I said Kamala Harris was complicit in a genocide. And that was a problem. So one guy labeled me a knucklehead.
You know, one of the
so I
issues,
wasn't surprised on election night. I didn't stay up for it. I went to sleep and woke up and then found out that
one of the issues I think with many people in this part of the world is that we listen to people with preconceived notions and we hear what we think we want to say. So in other words, you can't separate analysis from what you think, from what you hope will happen. They therefore automatically assume that because you say you think this is going to happen is what you want to happen. But it may be entirely be in opposition. Most of us who are doing any thinking at all could see why Donald Trump would win. You could analyze before it was happening. You could see what's going on in the American psyche. You can see that the liberals and the Democrats, if you like, had gone too far overboard for the majority of the people. You can't leave.
But Stephen, I think that narrative is false now. I think that's purely propaganda. The liberals were running further and further to the right because they wanted to imitate the Republicans. What happened with the liberals, I think, beginning with Clinton, well, beginning with Nixon, when they had a rapprochement with China in 1972-73, but which really picked up pace with Clinton, is that those guys shredded the American working class.
Yep. Correct.
What are now the battleground states?
Yep.
Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin. So what was the industrial belt of the United States became the Rust Belt.
Yep.
And thousands of people, particularly men, suffered. They lost their jobs. They lost their chance to take care of their families. So in many respects, the Democratic Party, which used to be seen as the party of the working class, allowed the working class to drift more and more into the hands of the Republicans. So, And nobody talks about that in American politics, that the working class is increasingly have been taken over by the rhetoric of the Republicans. We are going to make America great again. But they only see that in terms of racist terms.
Yeah.
But it's not racist terms, it's to get the people back to work. And the Democrats disregarded that. So Hillary Clinton, remember in 2016, called them a basket of deplorables.
Yep.
Trump called it, what did Biden call them? I can't remember. Biden made some derogatory comment, which further cemented their connection with the Republican Party. And that's why on every, and I'm not denying here that there's some racism and there's some misogyny and so on and so forth. But if you want people to support you, you have to have a programmatic platform that gives them hope, that lends them hope. Harris didn't do that. All Harris said, well, look, I have hope and joy. But what the hell is hope and joy when you can't pay your rent or pay for your mortgage?
I saw an interview right shortly after the elections where a particular gentleman being interviewed made a comment. He said, listen, I am at heart a Democrat, but in my opinion, I don't want to go to my school tomorrow and see a boy playing on my girls' volleyball team.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant by in terms of the Democratic Party going way overboard on the transgender issues, on the gay rights issues, on the GBLT thingamabob. I think you've got to lead, but you can't go too far away from your base, and you cannot stop if you don't recognize the inherent problems that most people do, and they're looking for something to blame and someone to blame, Jamal. So I know you're a human rights lawyer. I am a liberal, by the way, when it comes to social matters. Frankly, I don't care what your sexuality is or what you want to do or whatever. But I understand the fear that people feel. You know, I'm in the sports area. And when I hear certain international federations still carrying on about allowing, basically biological males to compete against females on the sport playing field, say, hey, guys, come on. This is not, and they equate it with fairness. But it's not fairness. It's total unfairness. And
part of the issue you're raising, I think there's a very dishonest conversation that takes place there. And you know that I stand on the issue of human rights and everything else.
Yep.
But I think part of the problems that the Democratic Party has is that it wants to make these issues wedge issues on the issue of privacy. So every cycle, it wants to talk about privacy.
Yeah.
But remember, when Obama got in 2008, and see, people don't like to hear this, but it's true. When Obama got in 2008, the Democrats had the executive, they had the legislature,
they had everything.
They had the Senate. In fact, they had 60 seats in the Senate, which was ironclad to ensure that the issue of privacy went beyond the reach of the court. Right?
Yep.
When the issue was raised, when Obama won on that platform to protect Roe v. Wade, the right to privacy, the right to abortions. I mean, it's vulgarized when they say it's the right to abortion, but it's more broadly the right to privacy and the right of a woman to do what she wants with her body.
Yep.
When Obama was asked about that, Obama said, that's not a priority. People forget that. He said, that's not a priority. And then by 2010, they got shellacked. And the Republicans won overwhelmingly. But they had that chance, but they don't want to use the chance. It's the same way in which the Republicans would never move against guns because they always want to use the Second Amendment. So both parties play that game. And I mean, the Democrats are worse for me because the Democrats pretend that they are for ordinary working people, but don't want to do the heavy lifting that would allow working people to advance. Had they passed that bill back in 2008, the issue of privacy and rights and abortion would be off the agenda. But they don't want it off the agenda because they want to campaign on it on each election cycle.
Well, they'll get a chance in 2 more years again, and then we'll see what happens, and we'll see how the Donald does in the next 2 years. see if.
What do you have any expectations there, Stephen, on the international?
I think he's going to do the obvious things that he's going to try and do, which is to first of all try and get rid of illegal immigrants in the United States. He's not going to deport 11 million of them, but he might get to Obama type levels, so he can deport maybe 400,000 or 500,000, maybe in a year and a half, maybe. And because I think there's going to be a natural conflict, Jomo, because a lot of the business sector want the illegal immigrants to be staying exactly where they are.
Exactly, and that's the tension right there.
The easy, visible ones, the convicted criminal ones.
That's the tension right there.
I think those ones, that's the easy part, and I think that's what he'll do quickly and easily.
Exactly.
I imagine he'll reinstate his stay in Mexico plan. And more troubling, I think, for the rest of the world is not that part of it, but more what happens with his relationships with China, what happens with his relations with Putin and our friend in Ukraine. He can't put in 60% tariffs that he's threatening, because I'm reading a lot of very interesting articles in both ways. Because a lot of people tell me, China holds so many US dollars in bonds, they could sell them back and whatever. It's not that easy, because the Chinese economy is also heavily dependent on exports to the United States. So China is in a very difficult position also, as well as what happens to inflation in the United States. I was in New York in middle of October, and I was attending some meeting with some very wealthy people. And I asked them what was their opinion of who won and whatever. And they said, well, while they prefer the idea of the Democrats, they have no doubt that the rich will be better off with Donald Trump in power.
Well, wasn't it the billionaire? I think it was the billionaire, Mr. Thiel, who said he doesn't understand why people are getting all turned up about this, because it matters which of them, the elite will continue to do very well.
Absolutely, and that is a reality, in my view of life, where the rich and the powerful always succeed. Always, right?
We see it here in St. Vincent, we see it in Barbados, we see it in Jamaica, we see it in America.
But that's because
indeed in China or wherever else.
Well, that's because human nature doesn't change, Joe, which is why you and I disagree a lot, right? Because you feel human nature and human beings are generally good, decent things, where I happen to think that we're generally pretty awful and horrible human beings. We're the worst form of animal there is. That's my view, how we treat each other, And the difference with you and I is I have evidence on my side. You have hope. So, so we'll see. But, I just...
Yes, we shall. We shall.
It's going to be interesting because it affects us down here too. What my friends also went on to say is they were concerned about inflation coming back. Because if you start to put big tariffs on things, then your
inflation would come.
And then inflation goes up. And if inflation goes up, then you have to increase interest rates again. And then people can't afford to buy houses, and you have serious economic problems. So I think the next year for sure will be interesting to see how far Trump goes. Whether he will just use that as a negotiating tool to try and get what he wants out of China. It's going to be interesting.
Well, part of the thing too, Stephen, is that if he slaps, because he says have a 50% tariff on Chinese goods.
Yep.
There's going to be the tension there, because a lot of American business are heavily invested in China.
Absolutely.
And those guys are producing in China because they want to bring them back to the US and make billions.
Absolutely.
So you can be sure that the American ruling class would not want the business class would not want a situation where there are high tariffs.
Yes.
So you may have what they may do is selective tariffs.
Absolutely.
On where some of the ruling class can live with it. But the other point you make about tariffs and inflation is that inflation is going to trickle into the Caribbean and create more problems for us.
Absolutely.
I think that's where the difficulty is.
But inflation is still impacting us. The other day I was looking at the government statistics on inflation, and government statistics are famous all over the world for underestimating inflation, as you know. Right?
Yeah.
With good reason. But while the overall inflation rate in St. Vincent and the Grenadines was about 2.7 or 2.8%, the components related to food and so on were more like 5 and 6%. And for the vast majority of poorer people, that's the real inflation that counts. Food inflation, more than anything else.
That's where they spend most of their money.
Exactly, but if you look at how the buildup of the basket of goods is for inflation, it's only rates like about 20%, which I think is entirely wrong and clearly, that's why people are being hurt so badly on inflation. Now it'll be interesting to see when we have elections in St. Vincent next year, whether how much blame the government of St. Vincent will get for inflation in the country and high cost of living. That's going to be interesting to see, because in most other countries, existing governments have tended to get severely shellacked for the perception that it's government's fault.
Well, I think part of the thing too, Stephen, is narrative and counter-narrative, and I think to a large extent, the ULP is better at framing narrative. I don't think the NDP frames the narrative.
Elaborate a little, please, sir.
Excuse me?
Elaborate a little on that. I'm not sure I agree with you in terms of. I want to make
sure. If you think, I mean, it's the ULP mantra that we have a narrative, we have a developmental narrative, and you hear PM Gonzalez talk about it, you hear Camilo talk about it, and they articulate what they mean by that. Oh, we are building this because if we build it, they would come. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Recently, when they opened the hotel at Diamond, Camilo said,
"Is it open?"
Well, whatever they had,
okay,
the handover. No, I think it was a handover.
Thank you.
It wasn't an opening; it was a handover. You're right.
Yes.
You're right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So when they did it, Camilo said, "But look, in 20 years, we have transformed Diamond into a thriving community." Right?
Yep.
Now, if the NDP was thinking, say, yeah, that's what happened when you stay in power long enough. In 17 years, we transformed a coconut plantation, which is known today in Camden Park as Coconut Range, into one of the largest villages in St. Vincent. But I don't think they have an appreciation for even their own record to clap back with something like that. And that's what I mean when I say narrative and counter-narrative. So because if you can't come with that, then I don't think people get a chance to feed. They think that the ULP is really running away with the conversation because you don't come back in the same way in which they came back. So, for example, I'll give you another example. I don't know if you had a chance to read a ULP's column last Friday.
No.
They said the column is called "Labor is Working."
Yes.
Now, you can rip that thing up 1,000 times.
Yes.
But do they have a serious challenge for it? So in that column, Stephen, you would not believe this. The guy said, unemployment is the lowest ever. Poverty is the lowest ever. Homelessness is the lowest ever. I mean, it's just utter nonsense. But it's almost Goebbelian. If you say it loud enough, you say it often enough, then people may believe it.
Listen,
that's what I mean by narrative and counter-narrative and framing the issue. Because in the law, we say, he who frames the question wins the case.
Absolutely. Well, I was talking to my friend Keith Joseph the other day, right? And we were discussing politics. You know, he's on the radio every week slamming the ULP and whatever. And I said to him, I said, Keith, you're a sociologist, but the reality is that the best sociologist in this country is a gentleman named Ralph Gonsalves. There's nobody else that I know who understands the Vincentian psyche better than the Prime Minister, who understands how to appeal to the Vincentian psyche better than Ralph Gonsalves. And
that is absolutely true.
And that is a fact of why he is so successful in politics.
A businessman, after the last...
Sorry?
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, this is one of the reasons why the NDP keeps losing and forever losing. Because I remember many moons ago, 20-something years ago, I was on a flight coming up from Mustique. And Mitchell was down there, Sir James Mitchell, the Prime Minister at the time. And I think it was around 2000. And he was thinking of handing over to Arnim. And I said to him, why are you picking Arnim? And he said to me, he says, Stephen, there's got to be a time when we are ready for competence and not just political BS, right? And Mitchell was very wrong. We were not ready. for competence. And I don't think we're still ever really ready for competence and technocrats to run things. I think we want a certain manner of leader and leadership. I think that's what the majority of Vincentians like and find attractive. Am I right?
I don't agree with that, Stephen. I don't agree with that at all. I think that
the evidence is on my side.
I think there'll be a changing. I think there'll be a maturing. I think that.
Where do you see the evidence for this?
I'll point you to it.
Thank you.
I'll point you to it. In the last election,
yes.
Friday was made leader in 2016, and he led the party into the 2020 election.
Yes.
He didn't win. He should have won.
Yep.
But he did something that no leader before him did since 2000.
And won the popular vote.
Since 1998, he won the popular vote, albeit by about 400 or 500 votes.
Yep.
But more than that, you may recall that in the past, the prime minister used to brag that the ULP has what he called a cordon sanitaire on the eastern side of the country.
Right.
Now, what's his name? Dr. Friday has broken that.
Yep.
So you have Montgomery winning by 69 votes, Camilo by 192 votes, Soboto by 227, I think.
And Southwind won?
Southwind by 229, okay. Curtis by 324. So all of those are within reach. So that is a clear sign that even for all of the beating that Dr. Friday gets, and some of it justifiably so, people are becoming so increasingly fed up that they are willing to vote in a different way.
But
Mitchell did say that opposition parties don't win, governing parties lose.
Very much.
And I think he's right.
And I think he's 100% right. So I think you're giving too much credit to the leader of the opposition in this case. I don't think he's the one that did it. I suspect that, again, Sir James has always told me too, if you stay there long enough, the one thing you can be sure of is the people will turn on you, no matter what, right? So to me, I think you're giving too much credit. I think a lot of what happened, I look at where I live, East St. George, right? The fact that Laverne came so close to beating Camilla, 170 votes, 180, whatever it was.
192 votes.
I don't think that the vast majority of people in East St. George who were voting were thinking, "Oh, I'm going to vote for Laverne because she's a better prospect."
Candidate.
I think they were thinking, "With Camilla, we don't see Camilla. He doesn't talk to us. He's not a typical politician, and we don't like that. So therefore, we're voting against Camilla." I don't think it was because it was in favor of the NDP. Or am I wrong again?
Well, I think that you are fundamentally right, and the reason for this, Stephen, lies in the statistics. People don't pay enough attention to this, but check these numbers. In 2020, remember in 2015, Camilo won by 613 votes.
Yeah.
In 2020, he won by 192 votes. But interestingly enough, Laverne Velox only increased over the 2015 figure by 11 votes.
So some would argue that it wasn't that she got any better votes, it's that Labour stayed home.
But my point is that for all of what people, in other words, the NDP some people in the NDP hierarchy have said, well, she almost won, as though there's any such thing called almost won in politics. So therefore, we have to run her again. But what happened is that what you had for Camilo was buyer's remorse. Having voted for him overwhelmingly in 2015, remember, he got the largest margin in 2015. He became invisible. He became aloof. Or maybe he was always aloof, but that was exposed more and more. People didn't get a chance to make contact with him. He probably believed that he was the crown prince waiting for absolution, and therefore didn't think he had to do the things that he had to do. And people who voted for him refused to vote for him in 2020. I think the error that the ULP makes is that they probably would say that, look, our voters didn't vote, as they always say.
Yeah, they always say that.
But the fact that I voted for you in 2020 does not mean that I'm a ULP man.
Correct.
You may have put up Stephen Joking, who I liked, and I said, let me give Stephen a vote, or let me vote for Labour this time.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that I am the ULP is the hill upon which I intend to die. And I think they make that mistake, and if they don't correct it, even Laverne, who, I mean, is nondescript. If we are honest, may knock him off, although I think it's quite difficult.
So one of your listeners says, if the popular vote was won by approximately 500 votes in 2020, do you think that number will increase significantly next year?
I can't say what would happen. I think the ULP I think the ULP is climbing up a steep hill because it's going for a 6th term.
Yes.
But as I said this morning on another radio program, don't count Prime Minister Gonzalez out. And in fact, when I said it, a ULP supporter said, you see, Jomo is still a ULP man.
You're coming home.
So you can make objective analyses because people question where you are. And I got to tell you, I'm not an NDP man. I'm just committed to see the back of Prime Minister Gonzalez.
We don't have one election in this country. I like to say we have 15 elections.
Well, we do.
Right. Okay, good. So let's let's look at where we stand. Next, let's look at North Leeward. Does Shallow win in North Leeward?
No, well, let's take who has show seats and who don't first.
Well, the ULP, the NDP has 6 show seats.
Okay.
There's none that are marginal. Would you agree? Am I wrong?
There's what?
Do they have any that are marginal?
No, I think they're solidly 6.
So their 6 are solid. So
I think the ULP is trying some machinations in Southern Grenadines. I'm not sure it's going to work.
Yeah, well, I'm told they're trying to get a popular fella down there, but I'm not too sure either. But let's look at North Leeward, because in the North Leeward, does Shallow make a difference there? Will he win?
I think he makes a difference there, and he makes a difference in the country. I think he's a big plus for the NDP.
So we agree that he will win. We both agree he will.
Well, I have long said, Stephen, if you have a politician who in his first outing in 2015 loses by 12 votes, and then in his next outing wins by 1, after the ULP showered that constituency with US dollars and euros, it means that politician cannot have a future in politics.
Right.
With the addition of Kishore Shallow, I think Kishore wins easily.
So we're down to 8-7. North Windward.
I think that Ms. John has a good chance. For one thing, she was a teacher. She resigned her job uncontested. She lost by 69 votes.
Yeah.
And rather than going back to teaching, even though she had the option, she decided to become a senator and continued working in that constituency. And I think that should augur well for her. 69 votes are not a lot, but here's the rub. That constituency is next to the Prime Minister's constituency.
Absolutely.
And
correct.
In the same way in which Prime Minister spent
special election period to move people.
Yes, spent the last time up there. He's gonna spend some time up there again. And with all of this money they have for burial relief, it is said that a lot of the houses got new roofs in 2020. I could imagine maybe they're gonna break down walls and put up new walls between now and 2025.
So but doesn't he have to spend a lot of time in East St. George trying to protect his son?
Well, yeah, we see, but that's the point I was making about Friday's leadership and advances, because now that every seat is marginal except for the PMs, he can't run around in the same way in which he needs to run around. And I'm sure he's doing polls, and I'm sure that the polls are telling him that. So the point you make about him being anchored, because he's anchored and people like Leacock and Cummins could rove.
Yep, correct.
Because they're going to have their seats.
Can Shallow roam?
Can
Shallow roam? Can he move around? Can he be an?
Well, I think he can roam into Central Leeward because he has links. He spent a lot of time in South Leeward in the Bookament area.
Okay.
Because his family lived there, his mom lived in that part, and I think he can come all the way up and try to assist Huggins, whom I believe, having heard him here on this program, I think he's quite an impressive chap.
Well, it's interesting because
could impress.
On the weekend, as you know, I'm president of the Olympic Committee here too, right? And we had a meeting on Saturday, and after that, we stuck around, and I was chatting to a fellow who says, you know, Stephen, I voted ULP and I'm a ULP man, but I think we're going to lose this time. But I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, tell me why. He said there were two reasons. One, the COVID thing that happened, right?
Yes.
And also because we haven't talked about that yet on the impact, right? Even though you and I are on different sides of that, but I think we agree with the impact that it will have, right? But he also said what shocked me is he thinks that this guy Higgins has a good chance. Huggins in Central Leeward. And that shocked me because Brewster won by 500 votes.
Yeah, but Stephen, I mean, you're a numbers man.
I am.
500 votes.
It's a lot of votes.
Statistically, if you chop it in 2 + 1, and imagine I'll give the Camilo example.
Yes.
Remember Camilo won by 613.
600,
and
right.
Then won by 192. So if you have a fall off, if you have buyer's remorse with Brewster and you have a fall off, and Huggins even marginally increases votes, he can take it narrowly and then try to see if he can consolidate. I think he has a good chance. I was really impressed with him when he appeared on Voices. I have not had a politician who has been for a newcomer who I thought had more cogent responses to the questions that were asked of him.
And does that really have an impact on the ground in your view?
Well, I mean, it's for him to try to make that into something real.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because he has this religious background, so he has that preacher background, so he presents well,
right?
And that could help.
Well, so therefore, overall, you have any predictions, sir, for 2025?
For the next elections?
Yes.
I think it's too early to say.
Okay.
Although I believe I wouldn't be surprised if the ULP don't go all the way up to the end of the year next year.
That's what I
come in early. Right. Remember, they were always a December elections party. They came November 9th last time, and can come down even more this time because all of the projects that they have, those projects are not going to be completed. No. They probably would go to the masses and go to the electorate and say, look, we have $5 billion worth of projects. Mm-hmm. As Prime Minister Gonzalez is famous of saying, you are not going to let me. In fact, when he opened when he had the second groundbreaking at the tarmac for the hospital, he said, I mean, you haven't let the man finish, we start.
So what's the impact of the how many hundreds of voters have been impacted by the COVID decisions that were made by the government? And does that have an impact too?
Well, Stephen, I think that's going to be a big impact. I mean,
big impact.
Let me say this to you. Let me say why I think it's going to be. I had Shefflon Ballantyne on my program a few weeks ago, and I never thought about it in the way in which he has thought about it and articulated. He says he can think of nobody who did not take the vaccine, who regretted not taking it.
Okay,
but he knows of multiple people who took it and has regretted. Have regretted taking it. I think that's a big thing that's going to play. So it's going to be wider, I think, than just the persons who lost their jobs from the government and in the private sector.
So
because a lot of people.
Do you think the NDP will try and make any headway out of that, or not really?
Well, I think they should. I mean, I am amazed that up to this time, the NDP has not. I have not heard it. I thought they ought to make a clear and definitive statement that, look, no matter how the court rules, and I'm absolutely confident the court is going to come back in the favor of the workers, but they should say, no matter how the court rules, all of you would be re-employed, all of you would get your jobs back.
And why do you think they haven't done this?
Maybe someone may call in and say they heard it, but I did not hear it. I don't know why they would be so. You can be sure Prime Minister Gonzalez would have jumped a long time ago. So I think that's going to be a big issue. I think that COVID vaccine mandate is going to be a big. It's we are in November, Stephen. We are 3 years on, and some of these workers they lost everything.
Yeah, and nothing. And it will be interesting to see what happens. So basically, despite all of what you're saying, where is the positive side for the ULP?
They have experience. A businessman told me that Prime Minister Gonzalez is an election genius. You can't doubt it. I mean, he has won 5 on the trot, and he's looking for another. So
Yeah.
you can't, and that's why that's the point I was making this morning when I said you can't count him out. But I think that they're going to spend a lot of money. But if the opposition really get people to go back to the United People's Movement slogan of 1979, eat them out, drink them out, and vote them out, I think they have a really good shot. Part of that was that they are attracting pretty impressive candidates. I mean, from the ones they have now, they have snared Keyshaw. Yeah. They have Mr. Huggins.
Right.
There's a toss-up in Western Georgia between Shaka Cupid and Louise Mitchell. And my understanding, there's also going to be a toss-up in Mariaqua between Philip Jackson and Lavon Phillips. You know, any of those coming in would put a new, younger face to the NDP. And it's not only younger, but it's also a credentialized face. I mean, Keyshaw has a PhD. Mr. Huggins has a master's. Philip is working towards his PhD if he gets the nod. Louise is a successful lawyer with lots of experience. Shaka is an accountant who is accomplished as well and has a fairly high position at the Inland Revenue. So those are pretty attractive persons who are coming in. And that may explain why Prime Minister Gonzalez jumped on Keyshaw when he made the announcement, and I heard he was on him again yesterday.
Okay. Jomo, you'll be happy to know that one of our listeners have said that the NDP have made that promise, by the way, to re-employ people and give them back their jobs.
Oh, wonderful. So, I mean, but they need to make a billboard on that and put it across the country.
No. Well, the PRO, I think, definitely needs to do a lot of work in the upcoming while. But then again, I'm not very active on social media, so I wouldn't know. Maybe that's where they're seeing all of these things to the times.
Yeah.
It is what it is. There was an article that I sent to you that you read and then called me back and said you need to read it again. Yeah. So I read it again.
Yes.
It's again an Eyewitness News. Kenton has published an article here. It's by a gentleman named Bergen.
Daniel Bergen, who I did not know and don't know. And there's a picture on the front, and if that's his picture, he looks about 16 years old, but I don't know. And there's a picture of Daniel Bergen?
I don't know who it is, but it's a picture of a young man, right? I don't know who it is, but it says Independence with Purpose, SBG's call for visionary leadership. And it has some interesting things in it, Joe. You felt it was written more in the style of a pro-ULP type position. And I said I wasn't sure.
Stephen, that piece is so Machiavellian that
go ahead.
We had a conversation there, so the piece is a piece intended to say certain things, but comes back. It was an attempt at objectivity.
Right, correct.
But it betrayed its bias. And that bias was betrayed even with the language that was used in a way which tells me that there's no Daniel Bergen who's writing there.
Okay, so you don't think it was this gentleman?
No.
Okay.
I don't think that man is so gentle at all. That may just be a pseudonym that the person is writing under.
I think it's everybody has their opinion, I guess. I just thought it was somewhat interesting because I haven't read the Prime Minister's book, or the Journey of the Comrade, or whatever it is, his I guess biography or whatever in terms of his political thing. But I thought it was interesting because some of it I could agree with, because at the end of the day in politics, you're in there to win. If you can't win, you're a loser. That's the way politics works, right? You're not going to be a good opposition leader, because then you're just a failure. You didn't pass. You didn't win. You got to win. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. But
Stephen, just before you go on, a lot of persons are saying Shama London, Winston Young, Kenny Boucher, Alvin Leacock, Kenny Sylvester. A lot of them are saying that the NDP has said this time and time again.
Right.
So we are not as connected as these guys. So I take their word for it that it has been said, and
Well,
it is in the public domain that they would do that.
well, okay. In terms
So
of
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I thought it is important so that we
No,
can
that's
put that
fine.
out there,
I
because
agree.
listeners may not be reading what we are reading here.
No, I agree with you. But that part I thought where the gentleman is analyzing there's a guy who writes a lot of columns too called Eddie Smith. Do you know him?
No,
You don't. Huh? I'm wondering if he's based in St. Vincent or not. Because
I
he
don't
does
know.
write some interesting things too. I like reading things that are not necessarily in agreement with necessarily with what my positions are, because half the time I'm not sure what the hell my positions are either, because you're so conflicted, I find, in terms of it's really difficult sometimes, huh?
But Stephen, but there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with being conflicted, because it shows that you have an active, fertile mind, and it shows that in your introspection,
Yes.
you can be here today and be somewhere else tomorrow, because that's where the information leads you. And because that's what research is about. You may start with a view, but the evidence may take you someplace else, and you have to be the man to say that, boy, I really thought that she loved me, but now I am absolutely convinced that she does not, and walk away without wanting to chop off her head.
Wow. You mentioned earlier the West St. George constituency. If we could turn to that for a second before I come back to some of the more important things. Louise Mitchell against the gentleman, what do you say his name is?
Kashaka Cupid.
Kashaka Cupid, right, who's an accountant like myself. The thing that disturbed me most about that is hearing some very strong NDP supporters saying that Louise shouldn't run, right? And I thought that was, I've personally found that very distressing, that you are going to decide, you people who are complaining about Ralph Gonsalves being a dictator and he's this and he's that, but you now want to tell people that they shouldn't run. Oh, right? I found that, it's that I find very, very disturbing, because these are loudmouth, big mouth people in the party, right? And I don't care whether you want to support the gentleman or Louise or not. That's not the point I'm coming from. The point I'm coming from is, why would you, who supposedly are complaining about the ULP and the dictatorship of Ralph Gonsalves, suddenly want to tell people that what you're doing in here, what you do, you shouldn't be running here for what? But interestingly enough, a lady who's on the constituency council for West St. George came to see me the other day, and she knows that Louise and I are friends. Why you don't tell Louise what she running for? Tell her don't waste her time running up here. We don't want she. And I thought, wow. So I sat her down and I said, tell me why, please. And she couldn't. Yeah. She couldn't. So we basically, and people get upset whenever I say this, but we have idiots who are selecting people and deciding who's going to be our candidates. Because they're I call them idiots because they seem incapable.
Not only do we have...
Go ahead.
Not only do we have idiots, we have useful idiots.
Because
Stephen, think about it. No, useful because they are playing a card that they are not even realizing that they are playing.
Yeah.
What you find, take for example the ULP. The ULP has been able to keep its, and part of it is because it's in power. Yeah. It has been able to keep its unit intact. There are a few renegades and outcasts and so on, traitors who they can't control.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, they're able to keep their forces intact.
Right.
Now, when these people, whoever they are in a particular constituency, have a view, I don't think they look at the overall picture and understand.
Yep.
I mean, Julius Malema from South Africa, from the Economic Freedom Fighters Party says, politics is about addition.
You're right. Yep.
It's electoral politics is about addition. It's a fundamental point.
Yep.
Now, you want Jomo. Another person wants Stephen.
Yep.
Both of them are going up for your party.
Yep.
Because forces supporting either of them think that he or she might be the better candidate. Now, if you really believe that politics is about addition.
Yep.
And if you believe as well that your party has been out in the cold for too long, you're going to split that over the person whom they run?
Absolutely correct.
You're going to split it over the person who you run? So, boy, if they run Stephen, I ain't supporting the party.
Yeah.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
But you see, you're making an argument that the other side loves to hear.
Yep.
And you don't even realize that you're making an argument. Now, let's go to West St. George. I have nothing against Shaka.
Right.
I know Louise.
Yeah.
We are in the same
profession.
Yep. Now, if I had anything to do with it, I would have selected Louise.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I have anything against Shaka, but I'll tell you why.
Yep.
One, Shaka is from in the Gourmet Bel Air area.
Okay.
But you can bet that there are people who do not know Shaka.
Okay.
The same is not true for Louise. Louise is known, and I know I'm going to shock you when I say it, Louise is known in the entire constituency.
Yep.
And who don't know her would know her as soon as they hear her name.
Yep.
So, who is this lady who's running again? Louise Mitchell.
Yeah. Oh.
Who is Louise Mitchell? James Mitchell's daughter. She has instant name recognition.
Yep.
Right? Instant name recognition.
Yep.
So that's one thing that she has overcome that Shaka would not yet overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then people can make a choice as to whether, if they can play on that. I mean, Yvonne Francis Gibson did well in that constituency for the NDP. They can play well. You know, they can play that to see if they can make hay out of that.
Yep.
The other thing, Stephen, I hate to say this, but if we are talking hardball politics, I feel compelled to say it. It's where we are as a people.
Yep.
But it's true. We like light-skinned people.
Absolutely.
It is not by chance that since 1979, except for 5 years of Cato and 6 months of Arnhem Uses, we have had white or close to white men leading us. And it's not a Vincentian phenomena.
No,
it is a Caribbean phenomenon. We can look at Barbados. We can look at St. Lucia. We can look at Jamaica. Yeah. So, and Louise has resources. She has contacts. And even if the party were to decide to run her, and even if she does not win, although I think any of the candidates have a good chance to win if they put up good candidates, once you win, you have a whole country to run.
Absolutely.
So for assume Shaka does not become the candidate. There are a whole host of places where they can put him in state administration if they want to move him out of NIS to do a whole lot of things that will help him to make a contribution that he might not normally make. So some of the arguments that I hear people, if he don't run, I done with politics. If this, I mean, it's
crazy.
Politics is about addition. Addition. You want to win.
Jomo, they just revised the law.
Why you think? One last point. Why you think Prime Minister Gonzalez had told Glenn Jackson, "Oh, you want to go in the gutter? I'll go down in the gutter with you." And then what did he do? He went into the gutter and take him into the onto the fourth floor as his press secretary. People got to learn these things.
But the law that was just passed or revised or whatever, Jomo, in terms of civil servants being able to, certain categories of civil servants being able to run, I thought that I had read that it specifically excluded certain people in the civil service, certain senior people.
Yes, it does.
Those was a deputy controller of Inland Revenue. Am I wrong? That they would not be allowed to run. They'd have to resign in order to run for politics.
I am not sure if Inland Revenue was one of those places, but the law is intended to allow for a broader section of Vincentians to run. In fact, that has been the view of the Privy Council for 40 years, since De Freitas versus the Attorney General of Antigua. Because in that case, the Privy Council said that the civil service is one of the most educated section of the population, and consequently, there should be an allowance for more and more educated, credentialized persons to make a contribution to national development.
Yeah.
So this law, in a sense, comes into bring the country in line with that. It's 15 years late, because remember back in 2005 when the government had this collective bargaining agreement with the teachers. When it was tested in 2010, they said it was aspirational,
yes,
and not really the law, until they were slapped down by the Court of Appeal.
Okay.
But I mean, look, I don't know, Stephen, but these are things that I think that people are too small. They don't think about St. Vincent. Like if I make a comment about you in a political context, it has nothing to do with you personally.
Absolutely.
It has all to do with St. Vincent and where I think St. Vincent should be and where I want St. Vincent to go.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough of us, we get so overly invested with the party, and most of all overly invested with ourselves, that we clothe ourselves in this amount of self-importance. I'll give you an example of what I mean. There was a young lady who became the leader of the NDP's youth arm. Can't remember her name now. Vakisha, I think something.
Right.
And then within a few months, she left.
Right.
And I am not so sure that the party handled it properly. It may have been an error in much the same way in which they handled Anicia Baptiste. Right? But this lady comes in, 6 months, she left. She leaves.
Yeah.
Let her go. Don't chase her. Don't talk about her.
Absolutely.
So I see her, she still puts out things and writes things, and who listens to her now? Who likes what she puts up? Mostly people who support the NDP, who supports the ULP, because for them, there's one less person that she may now say, I'm not even going to vote for the NDP. But last week she wanted to run for them. You see what I'm saying? So I think all too often, those are the kind of problems that we have. But, I want to ask you, Stephen, I want to ask you, in terms of the economy, what are the people in the business class saying? I mean, you interact with these people all the time. What do you get from them?
And I made a comment the other day, as you know, on another radio station. And I think you disagreed profoundly with me when I stated that, in my view, we do not have a serious unemployment problem.
Stephen, hold on 1 minute. Sure. Hold on 1 minute, because Kenny Sylvester is making a very important point. So before we go away from it, I want to Kenny says, I just made the point about why
Louise,
and Kenny says, but Jomo Thomas, the same thing will happen if Shaka wins and the NDP wins. Louise and her resources and contacts will be. That is absolutely correct. But remember my premise. There are some people in Bel Air who still don't know Shaka. Louise has instant recognition, which tells you, Kenny, that I am a little bit more convinced that Louise may have a better chance. So that's the only reason why I presented that to you. But I take your point that, if Shaka runs and wins, and the NDP runs and the NDP wins, the same thing holds for Louise. Her resources can.
I'm not too sure I agree with that, Jomo, in that here's the difference. Louise is not currently a civil servant. She doesn't need or want a job or looking for a job in the civil service.
Well, that's true.
If you look at Louise's background and exposure and the kind of people that she has dealt with or is used to dealing with, I can't think of anybody better suited in this country for a foreign affairs type minister, or to be a minister in a foreign affairs type thing, in terms of dealing with international bodies, dealing with international people. People deal with who they like and who they're comfortable with. That's the reality of life, right? When I live,
who can articulate the views?
I've always been comfortable around my own type. I've been comfortable around West Indians. I'm a West Indian. I'm not as comfortable around Canadians or English people. It's just a reality, right? So I think that, to me, when you're looking at, first of all, that Western George constituency, in my view, if the NDP wins that constituency, in my view, the NDP will win 13 seats in this country. That's
well, if they want to win,
landslide across the whole.
If they would, and that's what we have to look at early. If you see them coming in, either winning or taking otherwise seats that the ULP had for a long time.
Yep.
And
it would only take a small swing to accomplish that, for that to happen. So to me, it's really about it's and Winston here is saying people also vote for who they like and who they feel more connected to, and he's right.
Yes, indeed.
My argument is who brings more to the country overall, because when you're electing a government, in my view, you also have to think about the country overall, not just who's your best constituency representative. But who? Because you have a team, you have a lot of.
You have to have a governance team. You have to have a governance team.
You have a team. You need a team, so you got to think about that too. And as
I think, Stephen, the NDP needs a stronger governance team.
Yeah.
Precisely because they don't have an overwhelming, all-embracing, experienced personality as the Prime Minister Gonzalez at the helm.
Yeah. Well, I guess Anyway, it's going to be an interesting time. But back to you asking
the business people
sector, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry for
I said the other day that I thought that and again I'm going by analogy, Jomo. I have no statistics, I have no scientific facts, I have no evidence to back me up at all. I'm going by analogy with the people I'm speaking to.
So anecdotes, strictly anecdotal. So I'm not going to argue that point with you. But my anecdotes comes from the people I deal with, people who own hotels, people who own construction companies, right? People in the Grenadines. The serious problem we have in this country is we have an underemployment problem where we cannot find the kinds of people that we need to do the jobs that we require to be done. So you will have a situation where a construction person who I just spoke to a couple of days ago in Ratamil is talking to me and saying, Stephen, I can't find masons, right? I can't find masons. I will have hotel people who are begging me. They can't find people who are willing to work in the hotels. They can't find people who are bartenders. They can't find trained bartenders. They can't find even people who want to do maid jobs anymore. It's really, really challenging to find people who are willing to. Now, I understand, Tua, because if you're of the lower income scale, if you're making $1,500, let's say you could get a job making $1,500 a month. Let's assume. And you happen to live in Barreley or North Windward or North Leeward, right? And you have to catch a van every day and come to town. Right.
Is it better for you to stay home and take you $500 or $600 on some government poor relief situation, or is it better to work?
Well, that's only if you are getting the $500 or $600. I mean,
those who are getting it. But it's quite a few people getting it.
Yes, a fair amount of people are getting it.
Now, the fact that you can hire every 3 or 4 months, and by the way, I presume Christmas is coming up, so we're about to see it again soon. The fact that you can hire, and I believe they claim it was 6,000 people to cut grass on the side of the road 3 times a year, that also indicates that where are you finding these people from? That there is a serious unemployment problem. But I think my main concern is that we have not done a good job, in my view, in training our people properly for jobs that are going to be available, right? Up to now, I don't know if we have a hotel training school that way we could train. Where we train.
Isn't there a hospitality school down at Diamond?
There was something at Diamond. I'm not sure what it ever did because as I said, my hotel people, my hotel owners, and more are complaining that they cannot find people. My construction, as I told you before, you cannot find skilled people. Joe, I own a couple of houses, and I can't tell you how difficult it is to find good plumbers, good electricians. You got to wait. It's not easy to find. So I've often said that I think we've not done a good enough job. Part of the problem is, in my view, and I was very upset with the NDP in the last election campaign too, when they were promising that there should be a university graduate in every household. You can't build a society just on university graduates. And we shouldn't be what we were doing there is denigrating other people and other people's skills, right? My son is in university in Canada now. And I tell him a million times, there's nothing wrong if you want to go be a plumber, or an electrician. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think in our country, we have spent too much time telling everyone that you need to become a lawyer or a doctor or something, otherwise you're pretty worthless. That's the message that I have sending out.
I have some brothers who are skilled.
Right.
They don't have my credentials. They have much more money than I do.
Exactly. Thank you, sir. Right. And a lot of lawyers in this country
they're building houses here, there, and everywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because they have a skill. And I remember, Stephen, in 2016, I had gone on one of the radio programs here and I said that, the government has done a fairly good job in terms of giving scholarships and
lots of scholarships.
The tertiary level base in St. Vincent.
Yeah.
But I believe while we are doing that, there needs to be some emphasis placed on technical training, technical education, where we do the refrigeration guy, the air conditioning guy, the technical persons who deal with all of the emerging appendages we have in our houses now. More and more of us have houses. More and more of us have stoves and fridges and washing machines. All of these things need fixing, and all of these pay good money if you have a good or like mechanics, for example. They make good money. I mean, I've been trying to get a mechanic. I can't get a mechanic. They tell me
absolutely. Yeah.
So I agree that those are areas that we need to.
Jomo, I have an automatic gate on 3 of my properties, right? Automatic gates. There's only one person in this country that I'm aware of who fixes and installs and looks after automatic gates. And he makes good money from this. So the point I'm saying is we've been talking about tourism for 30 years now. But it seems to me that we've not done any real effective job in planning for it. I think I heard the Prime Minister the other day talking about that we need mechanics, for example, since you just mentioned that, because it's the same thing. I have a problem with my car. It sounds to me like the shocks or something I need looking at, but I need to be able to find a mechanic who could look at it and check it properly. I have a relatively new vehicle bought from Star Garage that the check engine light comes on. I've taken it back to Star Garage 3 times now in the last 3 months. They can't figure out what the problem is. I have a pickup truck, Jomo, that has the 4-wheel drive sign on it, stuck on it, and the people I bought it from can't fix it or figure out what's going on either.
But my problem with my vehicle now is that the dashboard is like a starlight, and nobody can tell me why these are on.
So the point is, I think we need to do a much better job in this country and planning for. If we knew we were going down this road and these are the kind of skills we're going to need, we've done a very poor job at training people and preparing them for these kinds of jobs, in my view. We're going to build a hospital, or we are about to build a hospital in Annisvale, and it's great that we're going to have a new hospital. Wonderful. That's not going to solve the real problem at the hospital. The real problem at the hospital is not the physical facilities; it's how you get treated when you show up there. How the staff treat you. That's the real problem. And I'm not saying how they treat me, because I get treated pretty well because I guess I'm well known or whatever. But I have people who work for me and they get treated very, very differently. When they go down there and have to wait for 10 hours and people just basically yell at them and whatever. So where is the training? Where is the development of people who are already in the public service, who are already in the hospital service? How do you invest in those people? You see, I've always argued it's really easy to build big buildings and to build new roads. That's easy to do, right? The hard thing is training people and changing people and figuring out how you change cultural values and societal values. That's
absolutely correct.
A real challenge.
But Stephen, you see, I think part of the problem that we have, and I can say that St. Vincent is the only place that's guilty about this, but we are concerned about St. Vincent.
Absolutely.
Is that there's not a lot of governance taking place.
Yeah.
So we don't try to develop a lot of democratic best practices. What we try to do is to outmaneuver the other side with an eye on the next election.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that elections are not important, because if you have a programmatic platform, you want to be able to implement it. But it cannot come at the expense of the nation. So how do you tell a nation, for example, that your loan policy is intended to put a hook in the gill of the nation? Now, to me, that's 3 strikes. That person should never have a chance of running St. Vincent again, because that's traitorous. Right? That's treasonous. But that didn't even make the editorial pages in the newspapers. It's as if we are accustomed to bombast. We are accustomed to shock therapy. So it doesn't matter what outrageous thing is said, we don't deal with it. So Prime Minister once said, St. Vincent is a big stone with good soil. And nobody pushed back on that.
Somebody, Charmaine Joseph Barnwell just said, I would really like for you to read the Education Sector Development Plan 2017. What is being done in education is not the plan developed by Dr. Errol Miller. Everything you spoke about is undressed on pages 17 to 22. Well, I'm very happy to hear it's in a book somewhere. I don't see any evidence of it happening. And 2017 is now 7 years away, almost 8 years away. And yet I don't see that happening. So forgive me, I just don't see that. And I don't see any real, and the sad thing is, maybe I'm not listening to the right people or the right programs or the right social media stations and whatever, but I am not hearing. I remember back in 2000, Joe, Ralph Gonsalves and Julian Francis were on every radio station. They were publishing articles. They were in every newspaper. They didn't have social media in those days, but I'm sure if they did, they would have been on that too. I just don't see that same kind of enthusiasm, determination, whatever you want to call it, to win an election coming from the NDP. So in my view, I don't think the NDP are going to win the next election. I think there, however, is a chance that the ULP will lose a very good chance that ULP could lose lose.
No, but Stephen, that's not fair. I mean, look, however you want to coin it. I mean, and we could go back to Mitchell's coinage that governing parties opposition parties don't lose.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, don't win, governing parties lose.
Yes.
I mean, but however you say it, if that were simply the case,
right,
then ULP might not have been in power for this long. I mean, there's a whole body of problems. St. Vincent is pregnant with problems.
Right.
And the opposition party has not been able to do it. So I'm saying, if you can get to a point where you can narrate well and you can present cogent issues to people, you have a better chance. Yes. So you can knock. Let's go back to 2000. ULP fundamentally knocked the NDP out of power. The NDP, Mitchell was compelled to cut his time short because he felt he had lost the police force, he had lost the unions, the professionals. So he gave up. He was forced to surrender. So we cannot say that the maxim that the ULP would not lose, I mean, NDP would not win, ULP would lose. Because ULP showed that even though it lost in 98, but had the overwhelming support of the people, I think 56% of the vote then. By 2000, it says, look, we are going to make a push for this. And because of the disillusionment that had been spread across the country, they were able to force Mr. Mitchell to have this conversation that led to the Grand Beach Accord and then to early elections.
Joe, if I could take a second, there is Winston puts on the message here. He says, but it's not only the government responsibility to prepare people for some of the jobs that are in demand, but there's also individual responsibility where you see a need and you take the necessary measures to fill that void. Winston, I want to address that for a second. And Jomo, today, a young lady, 24 years old, who works for me, comes into my office, and she's wondering if she could get a loan, or if there's any way that we could help her to study, because she wants to continue her study. She's 24 years old. She wants to continue her study. She wants to do a business administration degree. It's going to cost whatever it's going to cost, not cheap, but whatever. She'll do it out of a university in the States. So I sit her down and I said, okay, why do you want to study this? And she says, oh, I want opportunities for the future. I said, good for you. I said, do you intend to immigrate from St. Vincent? No. I said, okay, you're working for Musty Company now. This, in my view, is the best company to work for in the country. Now, I may be biased. I'm the chief financial officer. I'm not going to lie. But in my view, we pay the best salaries, we pay the best benefits, and we're the best employer, in my view, the employer of choice to work for in this country. Not perfect, don't get me wrong. I'm far from perfect. But so I said, listen, here's the department you're working in. Now, what I want you to think about is you can do your current job you're doing, and you could sit there now doing what you're doing for the next 20 or 30 years. Or you can look at where your future really lies. Our main work up here is in our accounting department. I said, why don't you think about instead requesting a transfer into the accounting department and then start studying for your ACCA? It won't cost you as much. We can help you, and you're going to make good money. And in 5 years, when you're fully qualified, you have options. You could stay in Musty Company, or you could work for other companies, right? The point I'm trying to get across, Winston, is that our young people are not being well guided, right? I don't know what the situation is in our schools in terms of providing guidance counselors. My 17-year-old daughter's in Canada in high school. She's very fortunate. She's in a brilliant school, right? You have guidance counselors discussing what you want to do, what are you interested in, here are the kind of courses you need to be studying, here are what your options are going to be. Next year, you'll be looking at which universities you want to apply. You have all of these things going on. This is not happening as far as I'm aware in St. Vincent.
But Stephen, but part of the problem.
While it's okay to talk about individual responsibility, when you are young, you don't know. It's a government's role, I think, to try and guide you and provide
Well, Stephen, I sympathize a little with what our friend said, Winston.
Yes.
All of us have a responsibility.
Correct.
To guide the young. So, for example, the professional associations should have more interaction with young people. Maybe we should have some successful men saying 100 successful men for 100 boys.
Yep.
And you have people doing interaction with girls, and you spread out across the country. Because you see, post-colonial St. Vincent is not really post-colonial, Stephen. So based on the colonial education, we are told we must be doctors, lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
Now some of us may become dentists and engineers and so on. But the kind of conversation you were having with a young lady is not the kind of conversation that are held frequently. So there are a lot of people who are doing tertiary education now, but a whole host of them are doing, for example, resource management.
Okay.
But how many jobs in how many companies?
And they likely to be. Thank you. Yeah.
So you are having all of these people who are mismatches.
Absolutely.
For what the country demands. And I remember in 1990, I think it was, Fidel Castro had said that he wants to ensure that in 30 years, Cuba become a medical power. And they did the investments
that was necessary to do.
Trained a lot of doctors, specialists, and so on. And Cuban medicine is renowned across the world now because they plan it.
Yes.
We have had a situation in St. Vincent where for years we don't have a resident psychiatrist. We are sending off This country must have trained in the last 20 years, at least 50 doctors.
Okay.
But there has not been any attempt to ensure that we encourage one of these to go on to study psychiatry. 3 or 4. So if 2 leave, 2 may remain.
Yep.
You know, but that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
We need engineers, we need accountants. I mean, if I'm a government and you tell me you want to go and study sociology, I'm not giving you a scholarship to go study sociology. I won't.
Okay.
Because I'm not seeing how you're gonna, unless you're gonna tell me go on to do a master's or PhD. I'm not sure how that is going to help us.
But Joe, most young people, right, do not understand what they want to study. My daughter tells me she wants to be a psychologist, right? That's a dream. And the question really is it suitable for what you're good at? And one of her teachers says to her, well, you know what, you should become an accountant because you're doing really well in accountant and math classes. So if that's what maybe you should consider that instead. But again, my concern here, I remember I mentioned Keith Joseph earlier. Keith, one time when he was teaching at the A-level college, this was 20 years ago, because obviously he lost that work after the elections at that point. He was teaching out there. He invited me to come out there and have a word with some of the people in the class. Now, at that time, it wasn't a college. It was A-level college, I guess, or whatever. And went out there chatting, and I said, hey, guys, what do you want to study? And I picked a one person. So what do you want to study? Oh, I want to be a marine biologist. So I said, well, what courses are you taking? And I'm doing, what was she taking? She was taking no science courses.
Unrelated courses.
No science courses. It said, but marine biology involves science. And it's like a light going on in the head. I'm thinking, but nobody ever told me this before. So the question is, how do we have to find a mechanism to be getting guidance counselors into schools. We have a situation where we are making young children. First of all, we have what I refer to as the national disaster, called what you all call common entrance, which I refer to as the national disaster. Because in my view, what you are doing there is every year you're dooming 1,400 kids to no real future. And the 400 who manage to somehow get through and go into the better schools have a nice future. That's fine. But by and large, that's what we are doing. But you have all these young people who then, those who get into school, into high schools, they have to make a decision about their whole future when they're 13 or 14 years old. Are you going to do business or are you going to do science? In my view, I think you need to have a stronger co-curriculum where you keep these kids' options available, open as long as possible to give them choices. I'm not sure we're doing that. I don't think we're doing that. And I don't
because
think
look what happened. Look what happens in the Scandinavian countries, Stephen, like Sweden, Norway, Denmark.
Yep.
We have this idea that children need to go into school at age 2 or 3.
Yep.
In the Scandinavian countries, they don't start school until they're 7.
6 or 7, correct.
And they have some of the brightest performing students in the world.
Yeah,
because
we want to skip students.
They don't have regimented learning.
Yep.
They have development of critical thinking skills.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's what we're not taught here. For example, a child who is precocious may be shut down.
Absolutely.
Whereas and you are trained to be docile because you actually intended to become a cog in the wheel, not to be a trendsetter, not to be an outlier, but to be a cog in the wheel. And I think that's what affects societies like ours. We need to really free up the young people and let them do magical things. There was one man who said, give me a generation of young people and I will transform the world. I absolutely believe it.
Well, I think when you see what happened out in Singapore, you can make a very strong argument that clearly proper planning and a proper focus on future development can pay off in a country, right?
Punish the corrupt ones at the top.
Well, good luck.
The leaders did say once the guys who were at the top and who were corrupted, they got heavy jail terms. Some of them were killed, and you have less. It may not be less, but guys have to do deep dive because they know if they get caught, they're going to be in serious trouble. Yeah.
Joe, I want to thank you, some of your listeners. They're writing some excellent things here, which some of them I can only glance at. But There are obviously some people who are thinking about these kinds of things too.
Yes.
How we can get it. The question
that's what we bring to the platform, Stephen.
But can they have any impact in your society, as you go along?
Well, we have to keep on fighting for that. I think we can't give up. We have to keep on fighting. We have to make sure that St. Vincent becomes the place that we want it to be. We can't depend on individuals to shape and frame St. Vincent for us. We have to jump in and ensure that we have a say in how it is shaped and how it is framed.
But I would argue that you also need individuals who are strong in leadership positions, who are willing to try and focus on change and listen to people and try to.
Yeah, but sometimes, sometimes people don't know what the potential are. Sometimes you have to, Stephen, you can do this.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't think that they can do, or a lot of people think that they may fail. And because, particularly in politics, because failure is such a big challenge, people don't want to do it. I mean, when I contested the election in 2015, I was convinced that I was going to win.
Yeah.
But the chance that I would fail was right there in my head.
So,
but I never spent any time thinking about losing, because you can't go into a race, and it's like the race of life. If you have to plan, you have to know what you want, or seek advice as to what's the best course of action that you might take, because sometimes we are invested in a certain idea, a certain thought, a certain action. In fact, sometimes we are over invested, and we end up doing harm to ourselves, thinking that we are pursuing something that's good that may not necessarily be good.
I just see it as a very challenging situation, particularly in a small island nation like this, a rock in the middle of the ocean, as I like to refer to it as, because you can see a friend of mine just went to Grenada, and I spoke to him 2 days ago. I said, so how's Grenada doing? Because I haven't been to Grenada in about 10, 15 years, to be honest with you. And he said to me, Stephen, it's like a different world here, in terms of the economic development and so on, right? And how the economy is going. And he felt it's very different to St. Vincent. Now, a lot of people turn around and say that, it's about politics. But it's also not just politics. It's also a function of geography, in my view, in that Grenada has certain geographic advantages over St. Vincent. Not St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but St. Vincent.
Like which one?
Like beaches. They have a thing called Grand Anse Beach, right? Where they have significant tourism. We don't have any meaningful beaches on the mainland. Our tourism needs to be in the Grenadines, and it has to be very sensitive because the environment matters. You look at Princess Margaret Beach in Beckwith, Joe, and for years I've been talking this. In my view, Princess Margaret Beach should not be in private hands if they're not developing it to the maximum potential as required to create employment and meaningful jobs for our citizens, right? That is something that should not be allowed. This is a major asset to the country. And yet it is not, in my view, exploited enough to benefit the people of the country, right? That's just my opinion. Now, so geography does matter. I was in Turks and Caicos about a month ago. Turks and Caicos, first time I'd ever been there. And again, the beaches, when you talk about tourism, you have certain advantages. Of course, I read the other day or listened, I should say, to Scarrett from Dominica, talking about building his international airport. And he's building his international airport largely from funding derived from a CBI program, Citizenship by Investment Passport. We have never had an honest discussion about CBI programs in St. Vincent. Instead, what we have is emotional rhetoric, sell with passport. We don't have a serious discussion about the pros and cons, right? And then a meaningful decision. Instead, it's simply sell with passport. Out it goes, right? And you know that too. We
are running up on time. We have 5 more minutes to go. And there's a lot of the conversation. A lot of time when I have conversation with you, they're always very panoramic. We jump from one.
That's how my brain works. Sorry.
From one thing to the next. But the issue of the raise, and maybe on the passport issue, is an important issue because it's a key plank in the NDP's economic strategy.
Yep.
It's a useful strategy, I would say, because the ULP's argument about CBI is not a very persuasive argument. For one, you say you're not selling your passport and then you end up selling it to people like Ames and Hutchinson and Weiss and some of the others, right? And then two, I remember hearing, I think it was Camilo who said in one time that, take a country like St. Kitts, that they only have 35,000 people. And if we sell passports like them, we may have more Chinese residents who may come and impact our elections. Well, look, St. Kitts has what, 35,000 people?
Yep.
They have been selling passports since 1984,
yep.
and we have not seen that problem manifest itself. So that goes out of the window, that argument. The other argument that they have made is that the argument is presented as though it is only the Caribbean countries that have CBI. America has CBI.
America has CBI. Thank you.
Have CBI. Yep. In America, if you go in and you have $1 million and you can open a business that allows you to employ 10 persons or more, you can get an American citizen.
Yep.
The other point is that they say that, we are getting in at the bottom end. Well, it's our fault if we get in at the bottom end.
Yep.
But if in July, Grenada said they had made like about $535 million.
Yep.
So you're making $35 million in half a year, still at the bottom end.
Yep.
It seems to me, if you go in and you are getting 100 million, then that's 100 million less loans you have to get.
Yeah.
Because the whole notion about independence can seriously be any of these islands where the vast majority of our developmental assistance is either loans or grants. We don't have any indigenous generating. I mean, Guyana could now talk about independence if it were to pull its resources back from ExxonMobil.
Yes.
But St. Vincent and Grenada and St. Lucia, it's a rhetorical flourish to talk about independence.
Correct.
I mean, when the Prime Minister flies to Taiwan, who pays for the ticket?
Yeah, correct.
Who pays for the ticket? The Taiwanese or St. Vincent?
Absolutely. Yeah. Correct.
So those are the kind of things that I think that that we need to think about.
Well,
so
I think also it goes back to
back in 1984. They said that remember Beckett had done a song, "Dust in Your Face."
Dust, yes.
So a lot of time they throw dust in on people's faces.
But isn't it also? But Jomo, isn't it also true that part of it is, again, it goes back to the NDP's poor selling and poor.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Kind of issues too.
The narrative.
The narrative matters.
Yeah, the narrative matters.
So it is what it is. My friend, it's almost 10 o'clock. Way past my
almost 10
bedtime.
o'clock.
Way past my bedtime. I am normally a
gentleman is saying that I have a 2015 position, a speech on CBI.
Jomo,
I don't know which speech it is. So my friend Nick Lucas can help me with that speech that I made on CBI. But hold on. But the other point, Stephen, that if I made a speech on CBI in 2015 and in 2024, I think that my view was wrong in 2015. I don't have a difficulty, but I can't remember making a speech in 2015 wrongly criticizing CBI. But
I have
my friend Nicholas Lucas, I am sure, would send me a copy of that speech.
Well, you know what? Again, if even you had said that, I think that to me it is a sign of intelligence that people change their minds and change their positions. It is not something to be, to be denied and to be ashamed of, in my view. I think, intelligent people think about things and change their minds and change their positions if they get new evidence.
Some of our ilk say we not turn back. So you can't change your mind if you're not turn back.
Indeed.
Because maybe they're doing like Churchill. Churchill say, if you think you're going through hell, keep on going because you're going to come out on the other side. But Stephen, thank you. We are at the top of the hour. It's 10 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
Wide-ranging, absolutely informative conversation. Thank you. It's
Pleasure, my
always a
friend.
pleasure to have you. And there were so many other things that we could talk about. But
Well, unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to argue, which we normally do. So next time around.
next time around. Next
Take
time
care, buddy.
around.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Stephen.
You guys
Look,
take care.
people remember, thank you all for being on. Thank you for coming on and spending time with us. Thank you for you. There were so many other things that you could have done, but many of you stayed with us on radio, you stayed with us here on social media. We thank you for that. And remember, read. Tell them, Stephen, tell them to read.
My friend, they said, you say you're a West Indian, there's only one place to hide a good secret. Put it in a book. We don't
Yes,
read.
read. Pay close
Open your mind.
attention because
And you know
don't
what?
know.
You mentioned earlier, Jomo, just one quick thing here. You mentioned earlier you don't watch TV much or whatever, right? Well, I want to encourage everybody. I have on my phone, I have a folder just for my various news channels. And I have the mainstream there. I have BBC, I have CNN, but I also have MSNBC and Fox and Al Jazeera. And it's always interesting to watch and learn everything because you learn from everybody. Different.
I don't have the time for them. All right, Stephen, thank you so much.
Okay, guys. All right, have a good night. Later.
Until next week, this is Jomo Thomas saying good night from Voices.
WeFM 99.9 presents Voices, a talk show that's not just news.